Hello and welcome to the second government macroeconomic objective, which is a low and stable rate of inflation. So I already did the unemployment videos, which is the first government macroeconomic objective, low unemployment. The second is a low and stable rate of inflation. So I'm going to talk about the two types of inflation that you need to know diagrams for: demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. Let's start with demand pull inflation. So, demand pull inflation is caused by an increase in AD from AD1 to AD2. You can see that here in the Keynesian model and the monetarist new classical model. Now, when AD increases, it could be because of an increase in C or I or G or net exports. That will cause the price level to rise from PL1 to PL2. Okay, that rise in the price level is inflation. Inflation is defined as a persistent or a sustained increase in the average price level in an economy. Okay, now, because there's an increase in AD, real GDP also rises from YP, here we're assuming the economy is starting at full employment, to YINFL. That's short for inflationary gap. Okay, it's the same here with the Keynesian model from YP to YINFL. What that means is that output is increasing. So by the way, these are also the diagrams for short-term economic growth. So demand pull inflation is the type of inflation that accompanies short-term economic growth, because short-term economic growth is represented by an increase in AD from AD1 to AD2, and output increases from Y1 to Y2. The rise in the price level from PL1 to PL2 is the demand pull inflation. So demand pull inflation and short-term economic growth go together. Okay? Now, in the monetarist and new classical perspective, all increases, every single increase in AD will cause demand pull inflation. All right? This is because the SRAS is upward sloping and the LRAS is vertical. So any increase in AD will always create some kind of demand pull inflation, according to monetarists and new classical economists. But in the Keynesian perspective, that's not always the case. In the Keynesian perspective, an increase in AD will cause inflation only if the economy is close to or at full capacity or at full employment. Basically, if the economy is operating on the upward sloping part of the supply curve or the vertical part of the aggregate supply curve. Okay? Because if you look at the diagram here, if we are operating on the horizontal part, that means there's a lot of spare capacity. There's very high unemployment. Okay? If you imagine an AD curve here, shifting to the right to here, that will increase real GDP but will not increase the average price level because it's operating on the horizontal part. So remember, in the Keynesian perspective, not all increases in aggregate demand will cause inflation. Only if aggregate demand increases along the upward sloping or the vertical part of the aggregate supply curve. That means only if the economy is close to or at full capacity. This is the Keynesian justification for increasing government expenditure and for expansionary policies when the economy is in recession or a very deep recession or a depression. That's the Keynesian idea. The Keynesian idea is if there's a lot of spare capacity, if there's a very high unemployment, then if the government tries to increase AD by, say, increasing government expenditure, that will create jobs and increase output, but it will not cause inflation. That's kind of their justification for demand-side policies when the economy is in recession or depression. All right, now I'm going to move on to cost-push inflation. All right, cost-push inflation. This is caused by a decrease in SRAS from SRAS1 to SRAS2. Notice how I said decrease. This is because this is a leftward shift. A leftward shift in SRAS is a decrease. Students look at SRAS2 being higher than SRAS1, so they think it's an increase. No, if it's a leftward shift, it's a decrease. So SRAS decreases from SRAS 1 to SRAS 2. That causes the price level to rise from PL1 to PL2. This rise in the price level is cost push inflation. At the same time, real GDP falls from YP, assuming we started with full employment, or the economy was initially producing its potential output, to YREC. Now, YREC here means that the economy is experiencing a recessionary gap as well as cost push inflation. So the economy in this case is suffering from both a recession and inflation. We call this stagflation. When there's both recession and inflation, that's stagflation. The inflation here is cost push inflation. There's an increase in the costs of production across the whole economy. Okay? Basically, this decrease or leftward shift in SRAS is because the costs of production have risen across the whole economy. Maybe there are higher oil prices. Maybe there's a lot of disruption in labor markets. Workers are striking, right, and demanding higher wages. Maybe there's a sudden rise in the minimum wage. All of these things, higher energy prices, higher raw material prices, all of these things that would raise costs of production across the whole economy would cause SRAS to shift to the left and therefore cause stagflation, which is a combination of cost push inflation and a recession. Now, one limitation of the Keynesian model, okay? Now remember, these models, whether it's monetarist, neoclassical, and Keynesian, it's not that one model is right and the other is wrong. Both models have their strengths and have their limitations. One limitation of the Keynesian model is that it does not account for this type of inflation. Okay, so in the 1970s, when there were higher energy prices across the whole world because of wars in the Middle East and so on, there was a lot of stagflation, and Keynesian economists didn't really know how to handle this kind of inflation, didn't really know how to explain it. That is one limitation of the Keynesian model. It does not really account for this type of inflation. That's why you can only see here the monetarist neoclassical model representing cost push inflation. All right, once again, let me know if you have any questions. I have a worksheet in the description below. Please like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends. And let me know if you have any questions in the comment section below.